I think we can go ahead and start taking questions from the floor. First question coming from table number 1, and then another one from table 6. We'll take 2 questions at a time, and then let our honourable speakers respond. Table 1.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, Deputy Minister of Finance. I'm going to take you on that. I hope you're ready. As a business owner, you have to understand how thankful we are for having this opportunity to engage with government on the budget just being released. We cannot go to Parliament. So unfortunately, you've volunteered to be here this morning, and I'm going to ask you those questions. As business people, you have to recognize that things are rather white and black for us. We make money or we lose money. You've admitted in your speech that you use our money to drive government. So we have to keep government accountable. My first question to you is, how long do we have to be patient for state-owned companies who do not make a profit? Because you're wasting our money. In the first instance, I'm referring to South African Airways, which we've been carrying for the last 16 years. And secondly, the notorious South African Broadcasting Corporation, which we've been carrying now for the last 6 years. So as the Deputy Minister of Finance, unfortunately for you, we keep you accountable with our money. So that from that perspective, if you've promised a more efficient government, we want to know what's going to happen to our money. My second question, I think it's related to the previous speakers that has made us aware of a risk. And my concern for job creation is twofold. You mentioned jobs are going to be created in infrastructure and agriculture. We now understand from the first speaker that 80% of our population is under the age of 35. None of those people want to work on roads, build bridges, build schools, or farm. So there's an assumption here, which is a very big risk, that we assume we're going to create jobs for unemployed people, for jobs that they don't want, number one, and number two, that the private sector, who we now have to employ these people, cannot employ because that's not the skills we're looking for. My third and last comment is on the fact that this glorious assumption that government and big business make that small business will create future jobs. Here's our reality. We are first and foremost self-employed. It is not our job to create jobs for other people. To make our business sustainable is our foremost priority. And I find it disconcerting that government and the corporate sector dictate to small business to create these millions of jobs that is expected from the small sector. And I think engagement with the small business sector is paramount before we make those decisions. And then my last question is, the only relief that there are for small business in this new budget that was announced was the tax credits. Now, none of us have had access to the Davis Commission. The Davis Commission hasn't even released their findings. So for us, it's impossible to get excited about this tax relief that's on its way. Please, can you tell us where we can get information? Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for listening and bearing the brunt of all my questions. I appreciate it.
Okay, before the Minister responds, you do know we have limited time this morning, so please keep your questions short and brief. There was 4 questions all from one person, so I won't take the second question. I'll allow the Minister to answer, and then we'll continue. And please just give us your name so that I can refer to you by name. Minister?
Okay. Thank you. Am I audible? Oh, okay. Because I can only hear myself. But, you are right, and I would want to repeat that, it is a growing economy that actually will be able to allow government to be able to fulfill its mandate of addressing the people's needs. And I fully sympathize with small business, and that is why we paid, so much attention to how But small business can be supported in order to be able. Remember, all big business, and that's why it gets all big business started as small business. That's where we start. I mean, very few business would actually start at a level. It's how you were able. Some were supported, some without support were able to navigate their way right up to the top and were able to manage this. And perhaps might have been lucky to just have entered a terrain that was easier to go through. So it would vary from business to business, whether you are able to grow from a small business to a large corporate. But I want to try and first deal with the small business questions before I address the issues of government supporting the state-owned companies with taxpayers' money. But and also you mentioned the issue of agriculture and infrastructure for us being the key jobs drivers. And the reason why we say that is because you would agree with us that statistics is such that most of the people that are actually, because the first problem we have in our unemployment, which is structural in nature, is because of lack of skills or skills mismatch. So we find that the bulk of our people that are unemployed are actually in those areas where you would require to step up the area of infrastructure, because whilst infrastructure does not only create jobs, it also spurs economic development in that particular area, but it also creates the capacity for even other businesses to be able to function, and that is why as a crowding mechanism, if you are able to create those jobs for the people at the lower end, you create an environment where the middle and the higher end also are able to come into the fray, because if there is no infrastructure, you are unable to crowd them. Lack of telecommunications, lack of roads, and lack of all other infrastructure needs actually do inhibit even the performance of the larger and much more sophisticated enterprises, including the services sector, because once you have grown the real economy from the base, then you are better able to create an environment where the other side of the economy also grows. So young people, yes, but if you look at the skills that are, the lack of skills in young people, we've actually found that we've actually been able to attract a lot of them, but also, as I said, as the economy grows and as the economy graduates, they themselves also are better placed to be able to grow. And that is why, among other things, we have introduced the employment tax incentive. The employment tax incentive does not only apply to the jobs in infrastructure and the agriculture. It applies across all sectors, as long as people are able to attract young people, new entrants into labor, into the labor market. Those people, and that's the 56,000 I was talking about, were actually mainly people at the upper end. And also the skills that we have, it is important to do a thorough skills audit, because embarking on the infrastructure, because I participated in the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Committee. One of the things we identified was that we lack some of the skills that we take for granted that we do have. We lack skills in well-being. I mean, I ask myself, is it true that we actually don't have adequate wellness? But as the program unfolds, we identified that that's an area where we lack skills. But the partnership also I'm talking about is a partnership where we all come to the party to offer what we have. In our engagements, I've been fortunate not only to engage with people at the higher end, immediately after the budget, in our engagements with one of the institutions who have young professionals among them, they offered us 2 professionals per municipality of the 278. That they're prepared to offer their professionals to sit in our audit committees in order to build the capacity that we think is lacking in municipalities. Because one of the key areas, as I said earlier in my speech, is that we seem to have overlooked municipalities as drivers of economic development and economic growth. Pardon me for the long responses, but the questions you have asked are actually quite involved. The issue of state-owned companies that are not making a profit. See, the question we need to ask ourselves is we actually need to look at whether state-owned companies are supposed to be making a profit or are supposed to be sustainable. And one of the things that we've been impressing upon, particularly ourselves in government as the Treasury, on your behalf, was to say, let us come up with a strategy. There's this long-term strategy that SAA has presented, which is the 10th after, maybe after 10 years, almost every year we have a long-term turnaround strategy. And I said to people, you must guard against this turnaround story because you might end up facing the same direction when you started. But the gist of the matter is we are saying, maybe we should be able to face the taxpayer and say to the taxpayer, this is your national carrier. We want you to fund it. But if you are going to fund it, you must be transparent and be able to put facts on the table to say, this is what are the benefits to our economy as a result of running an airline. Not to wait until a situation where it is in dire straits, then you rescue it from dire straits. You do that and you want to do it again and again. But if you were to say, if tourism is benefiting as a result of our national carrier, if trade is benefiting out of our national carrier, we should be able to quantify that and be able to fund it from some of the activities of our hospitality sector, if they are benefiting from it. Some airlines, I know, without mentioning names, actually run at a loss, but they are able to quantify how much the country is making out of it. When you are taken from here to point B, as you get to that point, the airline itself has got an entire profile of you. They know what business you're involved in. They know what you are going to be doing there. They will look after you even in terms of the hotel you're going to stay in, everything, because at the end of the day, the airline, if it doesn't make money through bringing Africa to South Africa and taking South Africa to the world, it should also be making sure that it actually does generate there are those positive spillovers that we should be looking at. So it's not a simple matter, and it is something that we assist with, and our support is now conditional, and even of the long-term strategy that is now on the table. It is now, the condition is that we should be able to know exactly. And when we talk about cutting, flying expenditure for government servants and all sorts of things, some people were saying you're going to kill SAA because they rely on that. So no, if SAA is able to give us good service, government being the largest client must also be given, proper, concessional and attractive packages to be able to support a national airline, because at times people fly other airlines because they do not get the service that they require, and it is not cost effective to fly our national carrier. So these are some of the things, including the SABC. At the end of the day, if the nation is going to fund these institutions, it must fund this on the basis of understanding what exactly is there for society to benefit. There is social returns. Maybe the community will be prepared to pay for it. I'm not too sure whether I've addressed everything, but the tax review, I will have to give our website. There's a lady back there, Pumza. You will have to give us the contact details of the tax review committee, because it is accepting submissions.
On our website as well. We'll just send it on if it's a document.
Yeah, we can just send the contact details and we'll be able to access them. Yeah. But I think it's important to get all the information that we can get in the tax committee. The tax committee is doing all it can, but we had said that they must focus on small business when they release their report. That report will also be out there for public comment as well, so that whatever decision is taken by government, it's a decision that we all take ownership of.
Thank you, Minister. We'll go ahead and take two questions. Table 6 had a hand up, and there's also there, I think it's table 10.
Thank you very much. My question is to Deputy Minister. It's almost the same question as the First Lady asked, but this is related to the payment that have contributed to the collapse of the most of the small business, especially the emerging black business, because most of them, as we know, they don't have large funding, and then they rely on the payment that they may receive after they have provided the service to the government. And now this seems to be a national problem because most of them they are collapsing, especially within the construction, because now the government have made measures to make sure that the small imaging contractors they should at the end of the day be able to stand up on their own. But the truth of the matter is that they are unable to do so because they cannot receive payment on time, and then this put them in more debt, and as a result, they will end up in closing. They are closing their business because of that. So my question is, the minister, deputy minister, how are you intending to overcome this challenge, because it has been there for a while and it's still there even today?
Could you just quickly give us your name, please, sir?
Nicholas Madhavan is my name.
Nicholas. Okay.
Morning. My name is Marlon Burgess. I'm the chairperson of SAMED, which is the South African Medical Devices Association. My question is linked to the previous two questions, because 80% of our members are SMMEs. And what we have seen is that with the recent survey we've done is that the business that is done with the government, state hospitals, has reduced by almost 30% in the last year or two. So what happens is that because our SMMEs can't provide those services to hospital patients are suffering. So the question then to the minister is that what we've seen is that a lot of the problems are structural, systemic, so that invoices are not processed on time, and the people that are behind those invoices are not processing those invoices on time. So what structures can we put in place to ensure that those invoices are processed so that SMEs can be paid within 30 days?
Thank you, Marlon.
Okay, the first question, as I've indicated, they are actually both related. The payment of small businesses within 30 days is written in law. But what has been lacking has been the enforcement of the 30-day payment. And at some point, as the National Treasury, we had tried to intervene, which proved to be quite a difficult task to run all departments from one department. But one of the things we have done, we've gone on, and that is why we've established the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer, because I think putting systems in place, and that goes to the second question as well, putting systems in place from the time of tenders being issued to the time of payment is one of the things that are actually going to assist us. And people in the private sector will actually be able to assist, because we always make an example of, how many retail businesses run across the country, and they do not experience the problems that we experience as government in terms of ensuring that payments are made on time, that the correct amount is also being charged, and that is why we're introducing the national price reference existing, and that somebody is able to pick that up immediately. It doesn't happen. But one of the things that we've picked up, I'm not saying that is always the case, but one of the things that we also pick up is at times there is an issue with invoicing itself, where when we try to expedite the payment, you will find that there has been issues with the invoice itself, where we now have to engage with the service provider. But those are actually, they constitute a very small percentage of those late payments, or even non-payments. So it's one of the things that the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer is seized with, to ensure that we have a point that not that we are centralizing procurement, even though we will do that with the large items commonly used, but with the smaller items and the smaller payments that need to be done, it's a matter of actually being able to pick it up. But one of the things we've done also is that accounting officers have this now as one of their key performance indicators. So, and we report on this on a quarterly basis at government level. The Department of Performance Monitoring and Evaluation reports to Cabinet on the number of cases that have not been paid within 30 days, but that's not adequate. We are also saying that accounting officers should also have this now as part of their key performance indicators, so that we evaluate them according to that, so that people should actually take this matter seriously. We really sympathize with what particularly small business goes through. Even when it's big business, if there's late payment, that late payment would have a massive impact on the cash flow of the particular business. But one of the things that we need to be quite honest about and be strict about is that if people want to be dishonest and pay, it doesn't take 24 hours for a payment to be made. So it is legitimate business that would suffer, whilst people that are operating underhand would be the ones that actually don't have this problem. And that is why when we moved into one of the provinces where we had problems, where there were a lot of these non-paid invoices, the first thing was, let's first verify these things. And we found that 50% of them were not supposed to have been paid, the ones that were paid. And the ones that were also in the pipeline waiting to be paid, we found that we actually had to clean them up, where government was actually being taken for a ride, where we were overcharged quite seriously. So dealing with that at the beginning was not an easy thing, and that is why it is important to put in place systems that would be able to pick up if there is any of such anomalies.
Was that an answer for both questions?
So I thought I tried to deal with both questions, because the other one is more specific, with the state businesses having reduced by 30% in the health sector. I wouldn't have a specific answer to that one, other than that, in terms of procurement, we're putting in place systems to make sure that people are paid in time, and that we pay for what we have actually received in order to avoid wastage of money. But that we need to curb corruption from its roots.
Okay, then I'm going to move on to take a few more questions. Please, Madam Somi, you must let me know how we're doing in terms of time. We hope we're going to hear something from the students who are with us today. I'm sure you want to ask something. We've got a hand there, that table there, as well as table 7. And then after that, we'll take table 6 as well.
Minister, let me help you a little bit. With regard to SAA, why do tickets bought with public funds get Voyager miles on a SAA? And if they do, those Voyager miles should go into an account, create an account that and credit government, so government can buy more tickets. That should maybe help a little bit. And if they are bought on airlines other than SAA, they should go into a government pool, and government should use those. The other thing is that we need a small business ombudsman at every municipality, because ultimately business happens at a local level, and that's where we need intervention. And because that ombudsman would be able to send the inquiries to the right person and be able to look at whether, in fact, those invoices that are outstanding are actually valid and so on. And my last comment is with regard to the infrastructure spend, the national spend. You've got a useful man there next to you. I don't understand why, with all these purchases, you didn't opt for a build and transfer, or a build, operate, and transfer, because I'm not an educated man, but just common sense seems to indicate that the risk would have been less, the cost of funding would have been less, and the delays probably wouldn't have happened. Thank you.
Can we take table 7? Just keep it brief. The minister, unfortunately, cannot stay for much longer. I will just take the questions coming this side for the minister or for Mr. Honved? Minister. Okay. Please, number 7.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Deputy Minister, and thank you for engaging us this morning. My name is Dedeline James. I'm from El Dorado Park, and I'm the mum with the students here. I'm the mum who wrote the letter to our president earlier this year regarding the drug scourge in El Dorado Park. Sir, I've listened to what you have been saying this morning, and you mentioned that a lot of emphasis will be put on education and a lot of money is going towards education. But I want to ask you this morning, being on the ground, being a community worker, why is it that we are not seeing all this money filtering through to our communities? Why is it that we're not seeing the impact of all this money in our communities? What tools do you have in place to measure the effectiveness of money that has been allocated for education? Also, an alarming statement today that 50% of our youth is unemployed. Yes, we are looking at the event, like the lady said earlier on, you know, we sort of address issues when it's at event level, but what are we doing about looking at the root cause? Why do we have 50% of our youth unemployed? What are we doing about tapping in getting to the grassroots and finding out that why is it that our youth aren't getting employment? What is wrong with our education system, and where is all this money is going to?
Okay. First, the advice from Peter on tickets with purchase with public funds, not accumulating Voyager miles to accruing to the individuals. It's an advice that I will take to the relevant ministry. I didn't even know that they do accrue to the individuals, but if that is the case, you know, I think it's an advice worth looking into. And the issue of infrastructure spend, our infrastructure delivery actually, as I said earlier, takes into account all the funding models, including the build transfer, the build operating transfer, even you know, the issue of assets that should actually reside, if assets need to reside with the hands of the investor, so be it. But all the funding models are being exploited. Most of them are actually being used. The area of the IPPs has actually also given us some insight into what happens when government and business work in the fashion of sharing risk, but at the same time attracting investment. Excuse me. And as the lady earlier put it, that you are in the business to make money, and there are instances where you are not prepared to take the risk because the returns are not equal to the risk, and it's only government that is prepared to do that. So that is, unfortunately, at times the situation where government is left alone unless there are returns. But in a number of instances, there are clear partnerships that have these different funding models, including the ones that you have alluded to. The other one is from Table 7 with regards to money not reaching the communities. I would hazard to say that what I've found, I spent last week in the Northern Cape, last weekend in the Northern Cape, Alexander Bay, very poor communities that actually you ask yourself whether the resources that government allocates do reach them. And I was, you know, pleasantly surprised to hear one old lady saying that we want to urge you to continue doing what you are doing, because even though it is small, the social grant that this family lives off, both husband and wife, and there are 3 children, so in total it amounts to about 4,000 rands. Because when the mining firms pulled out in that area almost literally collapsed, because it entirely relied on the mining industry. In fact, those communities came about as a result of the mines in those areas, and as they pull out because of the depletion of the mineral resources reserves underneath, and you know, so those communities are still there. in the absence of any other economic activity, those communities are unlikely to be able to make ends meet. So I would want to say that even though it is little, but it does reach some communities. What is important is for us now to step up what I said earlier, is to ensure that we get value for our money. I read an article in the paper today, in Business Day today, where someone was saying, indeed, social grants should be stepped up. Whilst we are saying they are beginning to reach unsustainable levels, but he said they make a huge difference in people's lives who otherwise would not be able to actually live in. But he made an important point that perhaps what we haven't done is to go beyond just allocating and dishing out social grants. How do we ensure that the quality of that grant actually improves the life of the recipient? He made an example of the Bolsa Familia with the fact that the kids whose parents are receiving grants should be at school. The kids for the parents that are receiving grants should be vaccinated, because we find in instances where that has not happened, even though the little has gone to the mother. And the two services I'm talking about are offered by the state free of charge, but because there is lack of care from the parental side, and the little that gets to those hands does not reach the actual recipient. And the other point he made was that we have these people on our payroll already, people that are recipients of grants. When we're talking about stepping up our community works programs, shouldn't we be involving those people so that at least, even if it means just topping it up, in order for those people to be able to also begin to realize some self-esteem out of what has been handed out, and for the person to begin to participate meaningfully in the economy of the country. These are some very important suggestions that the community is making, that people out there are making. 50% youth unemployment, I said again, because it is structural, it is at times the skills mismatch. But I said the reason why we've introduced the employment tax incentive, which used to be, which other people call still the youth wage subsidy, but now it doesn't only address the youth, is intended precisely to encourage employers. Because if we don't have these skills, but we also have a surplus of young people that are sitting idle, we are supposed to be trying to find a way of matching the two. And that's precisely what incentives like this are intended to do. But also the reason why we need to forge a stronger partnership between ourselves and the private sector is because we want the private sector to assist in committing itself also to attracting some of these youngsters, to give them that first opportunity. And once they have the first opportunity, chances of that person getting a second job or even growing in that job are much better and enhanced by the fact that there is an incentive to bring them on board. An example, at the Treasury, over the past few years from 2009, we have taken on board 157 interns to be able to build the skills that were required at the Treasury and in the public sector. So this is a small number, but what I have learned from that, looking at the percentage of the uptake, 61% of those youngsters, or young people, I call them youngsters because it's a person aging towards the sixth decade. But 61%, that's 95 of the 157, are still within the Treasury, and some of them have actually moved up the ladder. A number of them are in chief director position. And those that did not stay with the Treasury have actually been attracted into the public sector. I would want to believe because perhaps, even if I were to say so myself, because they entered the public sector through the right door and were given that opportunity. And I just want to add that, it's something that both government and the private sector should be doing more of, and I think we would be able to address this. And, because we can count the numbers, but if we're not doing anything about the percentages, we are not going to address this.
Unfortunately, I'm going to hold it there. Mr. Von Witten, once we have government or a representative from the government, nobody else is going to be able to get to say anything. So we're going to hold it there. Thank you very much, Deputy Minister Nene, as well as Mr. Von Witten, for making yourselves available to Busara Leadership Partners this morning. Madam Msomi would just like to give you something just to say thank you. Please, yes, you may.
Just as a complimentary comment to what answering this question and turning risk into opportunity, it just occurred to me that we have sponsored programs going, the employment subsidy program. We have economic scorecards and so forth. And one wonders whether we can't just use the two as self-fulfilling drivers and saying, can we get an element of a bonus score in the triple B scorecard that complements the youth or the other employment factor? And I think that's the point, is that there's a lot of willingness of corporates and otherwise to engage, but the behavior is stereotyped or channeled in a certain way because of structures that are in place. But if we can, I mean, a lot of corporates will say they'll open their doors, there's cash available to bring the youth or other people in, but it can be paid for, but it's got to be recognized in a certain way. And the issue is, through that process, if you then have most of the money paid for, it's recognized in terms of strategic goals, the funding is already in place. By joining those dots, you actually turn the risk into an opportunity. So here's a suggestion for you.
Oh, thank you. I would take the advice, and I was saying, I think we welcome all those inputs, both at the Treasury, but some of them that relate also to the tax, if they could go to the committee, because that's where we will be able to come up with a comprehensive approach that addresses a problem that we all are aware of. Thank you, but thank you very much.